Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today. This is week 2 of learning your 2023-2024 All-State Etudes. If you haven't seen week 1, you can find the link below or you can find it by going to my channel. Week 1 will explain a little bit more in depth about how to approach this project, but for those of you who've seen week 1, we're going to move on to the next portion of your region etudes. The first etude today is going to be etude number 1 in G major. Last week I covered measures 1 through 8, so today I'm going to start at 9 and go all the way to the end of 14. So just a little bit of a review. This is in G major, so you have 1 sharp in this etude. We're in 4/8 here, which means 4 eighth notes in a measure. And just like last week, I'm going to start by counting in the 16th note. At 16th note equals 80. Just so you have a very solid foundation for when you start learning this piece. Articulations, you have some big measure-long slurs in 9 and 11. The articulation in measure 12 is something that I'm going to look at closely. It's not what you expect. So you have 3 slurred notes and then a 4-note slur that starts at the end of the first beat. So it's a little unusual. Accidentals, you do have some accidentals, and you can always feel free to write in your accidentals in your music. If you have a sharp in a measure, it's going to carry all the way through to the end of the measure, so definitely write those in, especially if you find that you are consistently playing the wrong accidental. Rhythmic challenges, there aren't any rhythmic challenges in this. This is straight 30-second notes like we talked about last time. And your practice goal for this week is going to be same as last week, starting this at 16th note equals 80 and going all the way to 16th note equals 100. So now I'm going to play for you from measure 9 starting at 16th note equals 80. And I'll have the metronome on audibly so you can follow along. Just like I mentioned last week, when you start to learn a piece like this, you can definitely start it by playing without the metronome. So you just play the notes and see if you can get the notes under your fingers before you put the metronome on. That's actually the first step before you even touch a metronome. Notice a couple of things. Once you get comfortable with the notes and you're able to play with the metronome, measures 9 and 11, you can put a small crescendo at the end of every group of 4 notes to get you into the next group of 4 notes. That way you'll be able to play with a really nice legato over that whole measure. If you don't have any impetus going from the last note of a group of 4 into the first note of the next group of 4, you end up sounding pretty choppy. When what you're looking for is this connection. And that'll be even more obvious when you go faster. Measure 12 on these big octave jumps, practice them with a tuner as long tones. So before you play them in tempo, practice getting a really smooth octave in there, and also practicing by moving the jaw forward slightly for your higher notes. So you send the air up, but it's also the function of the jaw to do that. You'll notice if you put your hand in front of your face like this and you blow, if you move your jaw forward, you'll notice that the air goes up without you doing anything with your lips. You don't want to do this, if you can help it, by pinching your lips, because that really limits your flexibility. Dynamics. So at measure 9, I'm going to assume we're still in pianissimo. We haven't had any dynamic change from the beginning. And then you're going to crescendo to a mezzo forte at the end of 11. And then you are back to a piano, it's a sudden piano, at the beginning of 13. And then one last thing to look at, the articulations in measure 14 are a little unusual. We're used to seeing a specific pattern of articulations, but here you have slurred 2 notes and then tongue 2 notes, so just be careful of that when you start learning this. Next, let's go to the second etude in E flat major. Last week, I covered from the beginning to measure 12. So this week, we're going to do measures 13 through 25, still with no grace notes and no trills. Key signature, we're in E flat major. So B flat, E flat, A flat. Time signature, we're in 4/4, but I'm starting by counting the eighth notes, just so that we have, especially for measure 15, that subdivision is a little bit easier with eighth notes. We have 4 quarter notes in a measure, which means 8 eighth notes in a measure. Rhythmic challenges, definitely measure 15, and I'll talk through how to figure out the rhythm for measures 15 and 16 after I play this. The practice goal for this week is just to play this at 8th note equals 66, which is the same tempo as last week. So I'll play through this now with the metronome. This is starting at measure 13 and ending at the end of measure 25. Some things to notice in this. Measures 15 and 16, when you play this with the 8th note on, see if you can actually mark in your music where the 8th notes start. And you don't even need to write in numbers of 8th notes, you just need to write in where the metronome is going to hit and where every 8th note starts. And I'll try to put a picture in this video of how to mark those in. Measure 16, when you're marking 8th notes in, you need to have 8 8th notes in a measure. Measure 16 is split by the repeat mark between 16 and 17. So you're going to have 6 8th notes before the repeat and then 2 8th notes after the repeat, just so it adds up to 8. Remember when you're marking your 8th notes that 2 16th notes equals 1 8th note, 4 32nd notes equals 1 8th note, and 2 8th notes are in a quarter note, just so your 8th notes add up. Also, when you're marking in your rhythms, you can use the process of elimination. So just mark in whatever you know for sure is correct with your eighth notes, and then you can see how many beats you have left in that measure and figure out the rest of it from that. It's a little bit easier than starting at the beginning of the measure if you don't know where your rhythms are and trying to figure it out from scratch. For breathing, for now, we're at about half tempo, so you can breathe where it's necessary, and that goes for all of these etudes. Dynamics, so we start in 13. Again, I'm going to assume this is the same dynamic as measure 8. So this is a piano. We haven't had any change so far. You have a crescendo in measure 15 that goes all the way to the forte in the middle of measure 15, and then you come back down to a piano in 16. The last quarter note of 16, you have a mezzo forte followed by a piano. So you have a loud low section and then a soft high section. And that happens again. It's like a question and answer. Loud mezzo forte followed by a soft piano. Same thing in pick up to measure 20 and 21. Loud low part and then soft high part. And then you're going to crescendo from measure 22 into 23 and back down to piano. I'm going to play for you measures 15 and 16 with the metronome again at the same tempo so that you can study this, listen to the metronome clicks, and then play it over listening to my part with the metronome clicks so you know how the rhythm fits in 15 and 16. So this is again at eighth note equals 66. Moving on to Etude number 3 in B flat minor. Last week I did beginning to measure 5. So today I'm going to start at the pickup to measure 5 and go all the way to the downbeat of measure 11. And I'm going to start a little bit before I finished last time so that when you work on this you can overlap the two sections that we've worked on. Key signature, we're in B flat minor, so 5 flats. Time signature, you're in 12/16 or 4/8, but as we did last week, I'm going to start this counting in the 16th notes at 16th equals 90, and that's so that I can have more control over the subdivisions. This is definitely a good place to go through your music before you start playing. Mark in any accidentals that carry through the measure because it's very easy to forget. These measures are long and there are a lot of notes, so it's easy to forget accidentals that you've had earlier. Listen for this 5-note cell. So you have this at the beginning. That comes back over and over. That's a kind of a theme in this. So listen for that as you're practicing, and that will help you build on this musically. I'm going to play for you from pickup to measure 5, that's 4 notes before measure 5, to the downbeat of 11, and this is with my metronome at 16th note equals 90. Things to watch for. listen for those 5-note groups, those 5-note cells. You can, in general, breathe after one of those. So again, we're very, very slow here. The breathing is not going to be what it's going to be when you're at tempo. But in general, you can breathe after you finish a slur. Definitely take a breath 4 notes before measure 7. So after the high F, before the low F, write in a breath mark there. And that's somewhere where you can breathe even when we go faster. That's a very good place to breathe. Dynamics at measure 5, you're going to start louder. It says brillante, so it's going to be louder than where you started at piano. Think maybe mezzo forte. And then you're going to come down at, pick up to measure 7. You have a piano there. And then you again have a piano at measure 8. That's all for this week. We covered the second third of each etude. Good luck in your practicing, and I'll see you next week.